Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I'm doing something different today with a series I'm calling Cadence Reads Insert Theme. Because yes, I also read and I don't just collect the manga. This video will be focused on one volume or one omnibus reviews based on my personal thoughts on series I've read so far. This was a video that was requested a long time ago. So if you're looking for something quick to read, hopefully this video will be a fun one to listen to. But I'll be splitting this into two, with the second video focusing on the BL I've read. But fair warning, I may get into some spoiler territory, but I'll try not to. And if I do, I'll be as vague as possible. There will be a lot of talking, so let's get right into it. First volume is this 2-in-1 omnibus, 5 centimeters per second. These are the covers of the single volumes, and I think how they did the front and back cover incorporating both is kind of clever if you really think about it, or at least I made this up as a metaphor. Because for a story about longing and distance between childhood friends, having them connected but not on the same cover page is pretty telling if you read this story. So it centers around Takaki and Akari, who begin as childhood friends. They find common interests with each other when it comes to books they've read at the library, and that they both are transfer students. But throw in distance, which naturally leads to drifting and growing apart. Akari ends up having to move far away due to her dad's job before they could even begin junior high. But determined to keep in touch, they write letters to each other. Eventually, Takaki ends up moving as well, which puts even more physical distance between them. And it's like on and on it goes. The running theme of so close and yet so far, where the characters reach out to grasp at anything in order to keep a connection, but are hindered by logistics, emotional barriers, or a combination of both. I already knew this was going to be a bit of an angsty read since it's Makoto Shinkai, but the beautiful summary on the back, which you can pause here if you want to read it, did make it sound promising for a typical happy ending, which if you read it, you can let me know what you think. But overall, did I enjoy it? Yes and no. I did score it a 5 out of 10. The first third of the manga I would rate a bit higher because there's a scene in particular that I really liked. Other than that, it was a frustrating read of barely any progress forward and oftentimes a few steps backwards. Or maybe that was the point of this, in which case the manga did its job and maybe a higher rating is justified. But I remember after I finished reading it, it made me feel strangely empty and not in a particularly good way. I wasn't quite satisfied, but who knows? If you do pick this up, or if you have read it, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Next is Haru's Curse, another 2-in-1 omnibus. These are the covers of the single volumes, and they opted to insert the second cover as a thicker colored page within the volume, which I think is really nice when publishers do this so we don't miss out on the original cover arts. So this might be a little odd for some to read because it's a different avenue of relationships that's depicted and explored, but it's precisely that dynamic that drives the story and the internal struggles the characters feel and try to face head-on. It centers around two close sisters, Natsumi and Haru, and then the male lead, Togo. Haru is Togo's arranged fiancé, but she passes away due to an illness. From there, Natsumi and Togo develop a complicated relationship following Haru's death, where they go around reminiscing about her and all the things she wanted to do and places she wanted to see. All the while, Natsumi is constantly feeling guilt towards her deceased sister because it's like, how dare she move on and go through with this relationship with Togo when she would have done anything for her sister's happiness. Her sister, who seemed pretty taken in by Togo despite it being an arranged engagement, so it's like a betrayal of that happiness by Natsumi taking it for herself. Plus this haunting idea of what Haru might think of the whole situation between Natsumi and Togo if she were still alive. What I do like is that we get a perspective from Togo Usually we get one character's perspective and constantly left wondering what the other characters are thinking or what their motivations are, unless they say it in a dialogue or the female lead deduces what the other person is thinking. So that was refreshing to get the love interest's perspective. Overall, I enjoyed it. I rated it a 7 out of 10. I personally didn't mind the constant struggle, literally, throughout the entire volume. The story really drove home that feeling of shame and guilt, because besides the internalized conflict, there's the negative perception of what others, outside of the three main characters, think of Natsumi and Togo pursuing a relationship. My thought was that it made sense to have so much of the story centered around the guilt because of how close the sisters were. I liked the way the mangaka gave breathing room between Natsumi's guilt trips, like showing Togo's side of the story and then Haru's side of the story, because otherwise it would feel like way too much of the same monologue with Natsumi. I do wish the ending went a bit further with Natsumi and Togo, but it was nice leading up to it. Next is I Had That Same Dream Again. This one is a 3-in-1 omnibus. The cover they used is the second volume, and the other covers are included as these colored first pages. This is the same writer and artist that created I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, which I'll talk about right after this. So although certain details were a bit confusing when I first read this, since there is a twist, the setup and context clues makes it a fairly straightforward read on what the plot and the theme are about. It centers around Nanoka, a 4th grader, who develops a friendship with 3 very different people in different stages of their lives as she tries to understand a prompt from her teacher on what happiness means to her. There's also a classmate of hers, Kiryu, that Nanoka develops a friendship with while she tries to get to the bottom of his struggles and also learn what makes him happy. So the overarching theme is the moment of realization for each of the characters as Nanoka discovers happiness with them, and that the foundation of happiness is that it's thoughtfully and intentionally shared with others. Because of course, if someone is feeling lonely or isolated, where's the happiness in that? There are some pretty heavy self-discovery moments for a main character that's so young, but ultimately it's fairly simple. I thought this was a good read with some nice lessons and reminders. I gave it an 8 out of 10 because of that. I didn't mind being told the obvious or that this wasn't a younger character's perspective, because certain life lessons can stare me right in the face sometimes, but I'm so unfocused that I don't see what's in front of me. It's a meaningful read that also explores how happiness changes as someone gets older, from wanting to be seen to sharing ourselves with other people and the hardships that go along with that. And I think the story does a good job depicting that through each repeated encounter and conversation Nanoka has with those characters. So if you enjoy an introspective read, maybe think about checking this out. And so like I said, the next manga I'll talk about is I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, a 2-in-1 omnibus. And here's the art from the original second cover. Another Irumi Kirihara and Yoru Sumino collaboration, but this time a more emotional and impactful story that made me cry while reading it, after which I watched the movie and then cried again. So it centers around Sakura and her classmate who happens to read her diary by accident at the hospital because he was trying to find its owner. He ends up finding out that she's sick, but she wants him to keep it a secret. Her family knows she's sick, but other than that, it's just the protagonist. So because of this shared secret, they develop a friendship, more so because of Sakura's doing and persistent nature, and the story goes from there. Similar to I Had That Same Dream Again, it really gets into what it means to make and have meaningful connections and friendships, but really emphasizes how precious and fleeting time is with each other. I rated this a 9 out of 10 because I thought the character development was great, considering it uses the usual relationship trope of polar opposites coming together. The dialogue between the two main characters, while strange sometimes, like Exhibit A being the title itself, it all oddly makes sense, and the significance of the title is explained, so it's not just some random passing phrase. Information is also deliberately held back and shared at critical moments that elevate the emotional response to it and the overall significance as to why the characters are the way they are and why they did what they did. The unexpectedness of events within the story is even carried through Sakura's whirlwind characteristics. As someone who has a terminal illness but opts to try to get past all that and do what she wants with her life. If you're looking for something incredibly emotional and touching, consider picking this up. Next is Josee, the Tiger and the Fish in this 2-in-1 omnibus version. This one being the second volume cover art. I raved about this in my last video, so I will link that here if you want to check it out and hear my thoughts rather than me saying the same thing over again in this video. So as usual, some of my highly rated series are ones that make me tear up or literally make me cry. This one didn't make me bawl my eyes out like I want to eat your pancreas, but it did make my heart ache in certain scenes. One in empathy, not in that I can relate to Josee's disability, but just a sense of not feeling like you belong and feeling lost while the world around you continues spinning. And then the other involved Tsuneyo's friend. A particular thing he said made my heart skip a beat because it was so well timed and in theme. But anyways, TLDR, art is a 10 out of 10. I did rate it a 9 out of 10 overall though, because it's painful when you don't want something to end. I wanted more of Josee and Tsuneyo, more than the crumbs that was at least included towards the end, but I'm grateful that we got something at all. I also recommend the movie, which I watched right after reading this. It's basically a 1-to-1 adaptation with maybe a small added scene that I didn't recall being in the manga. It was inconsequential, but yeah. And then the music is beautiful with Eve and Evan Call responsible for the OST. A full package for just one omnibus. Next is the one-shot Look Back by Tatsuki Fujimoto. I've mentioned this before that I enjoyed this one much more compared to Sayonara Eddie, which I'll talk about after this, but I actually got pretty emotional during my first read-through. There's a level of emotional complexity that I wasn't expecting. It follows classmates Fujino and Kyomoto and their relationship as they create manga. They started off doing manga panels in 4th grade for their school newspaper. Fujino, initially being praised for her 4-panel manga strips, is asked to share a slot in the newspaper with Kyomoto, who doesn't attend class in person, but everyone soon discovers is an amazing artist. After seeing the difference in skill level, Fujino becomes incredibly motivated to improve. They eventually meet to then work together, creating manga, and it goes from there. Fujimoto sensei has such vision with the storytelling because it's so concise to be able to delve deep, even though there are a lot of panels of just pure illustration, no dialogue, just panel after panel of conveying a series of events or a feeling or character emotions. Now, I'll admit that I need to reread this for a third and probably more times than that because certain parts of the way this story is told is not quite linear, which confuses me. I won't say why or what happens because it seems so integral to the overall story and how it ends, but is there a flowchart or something to explain this? Anyways, I got the original Japanese copy right away after I had first read it because I was that blown away by it. Then I found out that this volume was up for pre-order at the time, so I got this copy as well. I highly recommend you read this if you haven't, because if you're like me who reads very similar tropes, lots of romance and slice of life, this was a very much welcome change, and I was very impressed with this work, and even more so considering it's so short. Usually a very wordy volume will take me about 45 minutes to read through. This you can get through in like 20 minutes or less, but to have it sink in, it'll probably take a few reads though, at least I do. So yeah, it's a 9 out of 10 for me. So Sayonara Eri, I read through a translation. I don't have a Japanese copy, and I know Viz announced a print for summer 2023. Before I talk about it, I'll mention that this one-shot wasn't totally for me. Not that it isn't good or it didn't impress me, but it didn't quite move me as much as I thought it would, considering the plot. So it centers around Yuta, whose mom requests him to film various moments of their everyday life moving forward. She suffers from a terminal illness, and so we follow his filmed recordings after his birthday up to her passing, to which he adds an unexpected ending in his presentation of this film to his class. Because of this, he receives a lot of backlash from his school, which drives him to attempt taking his own life, but is stopped by Eri. The two continue on to make their own film, and the story goes on from there. The perspective Fujimoto sensei writes these one-shots is really interesting and tends to go in loops with shifted realities. It's definitely something I appreciate, and it feels really unique to anything else I've read. Again, there's a lot of panels without any dialogue and just scenes depicting what's going on. And sometimes there's repeated drawings of a skewed perspective while Yuta and Eri are talking, but not in view or within the panels, or there's just nothing at all. These felt really effective in setting a mood and just showcasing the way Fujimoto sensei creates manga and his style of doing it. It's like when you're watching an indie film and the reel is going and music is playing, transitionary scenes to help move along to the next point. I'm not a cinematography or movie expert, so I'm sorry if none of this makes sense. This is just the impression I got and how it made me feel. But overall, Sayonara Eri really played with my mind. It'll be like I'm reading a scene, and because of the premise of the story, I didn't know whether what I was reading was legitimately happening or not, or if it was all part of whatever film Yuta was working on. But the play on memories and the theme of being remembered was pretty impactful, but I think I'm a more basic reader than this, so I gave it a 7 out of 10 because some of the details in this story went over my head. Like when someone takes an artistic license with something, but I can't quite understand the point or connect with it. So again, not bad, but not great. It was just a good read for me. Next is Love and Focus, a 3-in-1 omnibus by Yoko Nogiri. I'll be honest, I gave this a 4 out of 10, and the 4 is just because it's a romance story. And I love romance in general, that it was able to give it 4 points at the very least. I'll get into my thoughts a bit more in a second, but it's a cohabitation love triangle manga between the 3 characters with the theme of photography as the plot driver. It centers around Mako, who moves into a boarding house that has other high school students living there, including a childhood friend, Kei. Everyone in that house either loves photography or is involved in the hobby in some way, so it intrigues Mako when she encounters Amemura, who shies away from the camera for reasons you find out as you read along. But of course, with a love triangle, you get an unrequited love while the girl is pining for someone else. There were a couple pretty interesting turn of events, but other than that, I was pretty bored reading it. Like, it was so simple, characters weren't memorable. I'm obviously someone who enjoys reading romance stories, and even though things maybe predictable in a lot of the things that I read, there are other factors that make up those manga that still draw me in. But this story didn't do it. It actually took me so long to read through it, even though it's only 3 volumes. I kept falling asleep, and I'm not exaggerating. The art is nice, the characters are cute, but other than that, it was below average for me, that I'm not even sure what else to say. Next series is Ride Your Wave, a one-shot manga by Machi Kiyachi that has a film, which I keep forgetting to watch. This was also a manga that fell short for me, and I had given a rating of 5 out of 10. It's a romance drama with a bit of fantasy, which did catch me off guard. It centers around Hinako, who's a surfer, and Minato, who's a firefighter. Minato encounters Hinako while putting out a fire in her building. They continue seeing each other, and he eventually takes an interest in learning how to surf. Everything happens fairly quick in terms of their relationship development, which generally I don't have a problem with, so long as it's executed well or enough to the point where it's convincing. The drama and tragedy aspect of this is also quite sudden, but I honestly couldn't get invested in the couple and the story because it felt too rushed to me, and I think it's because it's so short. I did read this in one sitting. It's like I wanted to feel something for the characters and the situations they found themselves in, but I couldn't. So I definitely think this story would have benefited by being a bit longer for character development and having a bit more time to let certain events sink in and to feel for the characters and the emotions they were experiencing. One of my friends mentioned that they really enjoyed the movie, so I need to put that on my list to check out because it may change my mind on how I feel about this story. Next is another one-shot, The God's Lie by Kaori Ozaki. This one surprised me a lot. It centers around Natsuru Nanao, who's a great soccer player in school but doesn't know how to deal with girls. I thought this little scene was kind of funny and cute. A classmate offering him chocolates and he's like, "Huh? I don't want any," and runs away in embarrassment from not knowing how else to respond. The innocence of being a kid. But anyways, he brings home a stray cat one day despite his mom being allergic to them. So one evening, he randomly encounters the Suzumura siblings, Ryo, a classmate of his, and Yuta, her younger brother. Ryo, who offers to take care of the cat, but at a monetary cost. They all come to an agreement and go off to get some groceries. Offering to help them, Natsuru ends up seeing the living conditions the two are in. It's messy, no parents, and Ryo taking care of all the house chores. So on the day that Natsuru is supposed to attend a soccer camp during the summer, he opts not to, even though his mom assumes he is, and then lies to his friends that he has the flu. He ends up staying with Ryo and her brother and discovers other secrets of theirs. While reading it, I had no clue where it was headed, but when I got there, it shocked me the further I got and the more things got uncovered. The way the story got complicated as we learned more about Ryo and Yuta, and then seeing how much Natsuru adds to their lives, it really drew me in. Overall, I got chills the more we found out, and just the weight of responsibility on these young kids. There are quite a few ironic depictions in the story that makes it interesting that the title of this manga is The God's Lie. From Natsuru, who seemingly can't get along with girls, ends up spending an entire summer with one, and then Ryo taking in an abandoned cat despite their living conditions, and how young the characters are but quickly having to grow up because of family situations and tragedies, holding on to something or someone no matter what the consequences. After reading it, I was pretty blown away because I was just expecting a slice of life. Two kids who come together and just go about their days. I wasn't expecting to read what I did, and for that, I gave it an 8 out of 10, which I would totally raise my rating if there was more after the ending, which I guess is a good thing, because that means I wish it didn't end where it did. I would have loved for it to expand on where the characters go from there. That's always the case though. When I find I really enjoyed reading something, I wanted more. So yeah, take this as a thumbs up if you've thought about checking it out. And last series for this video is Wolf Children, Ame and Yuki, a 3-in-1 hardcover omnibus. I read this after reading Josee, the Tiger and the Fish because I was in the mood to keep reading emotional stories. So it spans quite a few years, beginning with Hana, who first encounters a man attending her university, but someone who wasn't actually a student. She takes an interest in him, at which point she finds out that he is a descendant of Japanese wolves, which allows him to have a wolf form. Eventually, they fall in love and have children, Yuki and Ame. Yuki named as such because she was born on a snowy day, while Ame on a rainy day. However, the man dies, which leaves Hana and her children to navigate life and what that means for the children being part human and part wolf. The majority of the series shows the struggle Hana goes through as a single mom, and not just that, a mother with kids that have qualities to them that neither of them can share with the general public. It's really well portrayed in the manga. The way it puts them in even more of a bind while needing to take extra precautions and being more considerate of who they are in the overall context of things. Then there were major decisions Hana had to make on behalf of her children and the tireless days and nights to make sure they grew up in an environment that helped them thrive. And ultimately, there were realities Hana had to accept as Yuki and Ame grew older and they discovered more about who they are and who they wanted to be. While it didn't make me cry, it was still a beautiful story of family, love, and acceptance. I rated it a 7 out of 10 because I was fully expecting to cry. So this is more of a me problem, and I'm not sure why this didn't hit me as much as I was hearing that it would. Maybe I was all cried out from having read an emotional series right before, but anyways, still a very heartwarming and heart-wrenching read that's a mix of melancholy and wholesomeness. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk in depth about the series. Scripting this took a long time because I wanted to formulate my thoughts properly, and I had to reread some of these because it's been a while since I had first read them, so I needed to reacquaint myself with what even happened and what my initial thoughts were. Let me know your thoughts on these series because I'd love to continue chatting about it with you all. I'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in my next video. Take care.